Mic check. There we go. Good evening. Welcome to everybody. We're thankful that you're here tonight. Would like to update you on a few prayer requests. Kenny Hamby, the brother of Gayla Glass, who has attended here in the past, and the husband of Lee Hamby, who teaches at LCHS, is being treated at St. Thomas Hospital after suffering a GI bleed on Monday and another small stroke, and at last report he was improving. Katie Holman, the great niece-in-law of Bob and Linda Marcus, had more reconstructive surgery today following her recent breast cancer treatment, and at last report the surgery was complete and she was in recovery. Mateo Calisco, the nephew of Rodolfo Espinoza, has still not had his surgery yet, but it is expected to take place. He still expects to have some sort of treatment or surgery this week in Milan, Italy, concerning an abnormal level of tumor cells. And Sheila Methvin, the niece of Vicki Crouch, was able to return home this afternoon from a stay in St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital in Murfreesboro with liver and kidney problems. She will have home health care for a while, and she plans to have the liver testing done at a later date. Some reminders: this coming Sunday, July the 30th, will be a fifth Sunday. We'll have a fellowship meal in the fellowship building after our morning worship service, and so we'll have a need to bring plenty of food for our own family and enough to share with our guests. We look forward to that. Please stay and enjoy that fellowship. And then, Mark Miller, is it ready? Is it time? Is it okay for us to set up tables and chairs tonight? We good? Is that good to set up tables and chairs tonight, Mark? In the fellowship building? All right. So after Bible class tonight, we'll need some help getting that set up so it'll be ready to go for the fellowship meal. Also, this coming Sunday, July the 30th, the Lions will be going down to the Shoals Area Youth Series and the Songs of Summer finale, and we will be meeting in the south parking lot at 4 p.m. to head initially to Heritage Christian University for the Shoals Area Youth Series, and there will be a meal provided there. After that, we will head to the Tuscumbia Church of Christ, where the Songs of Summer finale is taking place this year. It's time to order our disciple shirts, and you can go to the church website or sign up on the form posted in the foyer in the back. If you'd like to participate in the Magi Project, please stop by the west side of the foyer back here and get boxes that you can complete and fill up. Each box has a checklist and an instruction sheet. If you have questions about that, you can see Sandy Adams or Denise Hughes. And please return your completed and filled boxes by Sunday, August the 6th. So you got a week and a half. A week from this coming Sunday, and there's still a lot of boxes back there that need to be taken, so let's take care of all that. Ice cream supper is coming up, scheduled for Sunday, August the 6th at David Crockett State Park, shelter number 1. And this will also be an opportunity to tell Samuel goodbye. It's going to be his last day with us. It's been a good summer with him here with us. You might want to show your appreciation to him in some way, and I'm sure he wouldn't turn any of that down, but we look forward to that time together. One final thing, the back-to-school brunch that's taking place August the 12th, it's been opened up to any of the senior ministry ladies, and if you would like to help with that, there is a sign-up sheet in the foyer for things that you might want to bring to help out with that. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Samuel. He's going to lead some songs for us.
How's everybody tonight? Wonderful. Good, good, good. Well, as you can see, you're stuck with me tonight. So we'll see how that goes. Tim was saying we had a little shortfall on our scheduling, so he called me Monday night and said, "Can you do Wednesday?" And I said, "Sure." Patriarchs are easy, right? I don't think, has everybody here pretty much been here the last 3 weeks? What has it been? 3 or 4 weeks that we've been doing the patriarchs now? That sound right? I don't know that I've been in this class for one of these yet, so I'm not really sure how they've been going. I assume with the teachers we've had, they've been going pretty good. I started looking through the list Monday to try to figure out which patriarch, and the one that I chose is Caleb. Now, when I say Caleb as a patriarch, that one just really jumps out and screams at you, doesn't it? You have to sit there and kind of think about that. What do you typically think of when you think of Caleb? Anything in particular? I heard something. Somebody say Joshua. It's kind of a paired thing, right? Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb. That's kind of how you hear it. There is not a lot in the Bible about Caleb. Found a couple chapters in the book of Numbers and a little bit in the book of Joshua. And we will cover pretty much all that tonight. And, so when I started looking at things, I said, what are we going to do? What's the purpose? Where are we going with this? And through the study, you learn pretty quickly, Caleb's a pretty important person in the grand scheme of things, especially when you think about the context of how the story went down and getting into the land of Canaan and how that all worked. That was a pretty short list when you start thinking about how it all went down. So, an important figure. And since there's not a lot of information, what you have to do is kind of look at the man's character through the information that we are given and just kind of try to glean from that some things about him. Kind of look at, some personality traits, maybe some things that kind of become evident as you study it. And then, try to put some kind of application to it. What about his traits or what about the things he chose to do are beneficial or would make some sense for us as Christians today. So that's kind of the approach I want to take with this tonight. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 13 if you want to be turning over there. And then we'll eventually get into Joshua. But I wanted to start by just kind of setting the background for kind of where we're at, moving into where he comes into the picture. We've got Moses, who has just brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. So, there's, what have you heard? 2 million, maybe even more, maybe 3 million people roaming around the desert out there. One of the things that you keep coming across when you study this thing, you keep hearing the term lost. They were lost in the desert, lost. And then a lot of the people that are making commentary said, no, they were never lost. And, when you look at the geographical situation they were in, especially with a couple million people, you almost couldn't get lost trying to find the land of Canaan. I mean, they would have stumbled all over themselves and ended up there if they'd have just, kind of got pointed in the right direction. So what we find out eventually is obviously they wasn't lost, but, they were being led by God in what was going on there. At this point in time, they'd come out of the land of Egypt. They had got to Sinai. So we had all the events that we know about, historically speaking, there. Moses goes up on the mountain. He gets the 10 Commandments. He comes down. He's upset. He breaks them. He's got to go back up and get a second set. What does that tell you? The children of Israel had been in captivity for around 400 years. So the way they practiced their religion and the way they knew their God, the things were a little rusty. A lot of pagan practices and things had infiltrated, and their mindset wasn't quite right. I never did find an answer I was extremely comfortable with, but it, seems like maybe they had been out of Egypt around a year by the time they got to Sinai, and the time that it took to get the law given to them, and we're at that point. Thinking about it, it kind of seems to me that, in a sense, this was a retraining ground, if you will. God was using this time to tool the children of Israel, giving them the law, getting them back used to things. Once the law is given to them, they get instructions for the tabernacle. You start to see more formal worship practices, and all these things are taking place in this fairly short period of time. And our story kind of picks up there. They're kind of geared up. Moses is in charge. And at this point in time, God says to go out into the wilderness of Paran and set up camp. Now, what he was doing is telling Moses is, let's go to the promised land. It's time. We're going to head to Canaan. And that's really where the story picks up. That's where Caleb comes into the picture. I want to look at a little bit about Caleb before we get into the scripture, just to kind of set up things for him a little bit. We know where they're at. We know kind of what God's thinking. We know where they're heading. What's Caleb like? One of the things you pick up pretty quickly in this is he's 40 years old. I mean, it pretty much says it. He's a 40-year-old man. Thinking about that, children of Israel have been in captivity for 400 years. Guess what he was born into? Slavery. You got a man that was born as a slave, 40 years earlier. So what you're going to see in him from a character standpoint is a slave becoming a leader. Perhaps he was a leader already inside his particular tribe, which happens to be the tribe of Judah, while he was in captivity. Doesn't say a lot about that. But obviously, as they got out of captivity, got into the desert, and spent this time in the desert, or in the wilderness as well, his leadership characteristics come up high, and he is a natural leader, and actually is a leader or head of, if you will, one of the leaders of the tribe of Judah. What we're going to see is that he was one of 12 men chosen by Moses. So when you think about a couple million plus people out there, when you say leader, you say 12 tribes, there's 150 to 200,000 people in each tribe. When you say leader, he's a leader over a lot of people. Very influential, had to be a smart man. All the characteristics that go with a good leader. When you can think about that. One of the things that came to me is think about what that man had witnessed in his life over that 40-year period. He's in captivity. I'm going to say those people knew Moses, knew who Moses was, knew what was going on. They obviously were a part of the plagues, the different things that led them out and got them free at some point. So they had witnessed God firsthand in ways that we can't obviously imagine. The things that he had seen, the events that led to getting him to this point, traveling with a few million people, getting to Sinai. When I think about Mount Sinai, and I think about the law and the Ten Commandments, you've got this great mountain and this thing's covered with a cloud, and you've seen the representation, the lightning and the fire and the smoke, and he was there. He saw all this. So you think about that and how that has framed him as a person and his leadership style as well. What we're about to find out about him in this particular chapter of Numbers, that he's a spy. And that's where we think Joshua and Caleb, and we think about the 12 spies and going out into the land of Canaan. He's a spy, and I think, you start thinking about the movies you've seen growing up and what we think of as a spy. I'm sure he had some pretty interesting techniques and different things that made him valuable there. Dependable comes to mind. He was asked to do a job, and he went and did it. Very capable. What we find out about him, too, when we're thinking about the spiritual side of things, he was a very faithful man and very believing. When we think about the task at hand, and it was led by God. God told Moses to do these things, and they were going to go look into what the land of Canaan looked like, Caleb and Joshua were the only ones that we find that had faith and they believed and they went into it with a positive attitude. When we get out of this particular situation through the spy account and understand what goes on there, we start thinking about him being a wanderer. Because, we know we've got a period of time that the children of Israel are going to wander. And we'll find out more about why and how that took place and all that as we go through the study. But to me, that draws up an image of patience. Someone that, had the right attitude, had the right mindset, had the right faith, believed in the right things, yet other people held him back. So he had to be a very patient man. A very enduring faith, a faith that overcomes fear. I wrote, he knew and saw what God had promised. He was one of the first of the children of Israel to ever lay eyes on the promised land. They had been so separated from this part of the world, being in captivity, they had no idea what they were about to behold. And I wrote that he was submissive. And I think that's important to realize about Caleb. And when you think about that, what I'm alluding to is his relationship with Joshua. We know that Joshua ultimately was the spiritual leader of the children of Israel after Moses and Aaron died. So early on, you see, I'm not going to say it's competition, but you see both Caleb and Joshua in more of an equal place. But through the process of time and as the story unfolds, you see Joshua's leadership abilities rise to a level that gave him the nod. So I see Caleb as being a fairly submissive, but also very trustworthy man. And then finally, you see him as a soldier, a warrior, if you will. At some point, Joshua is going to lead the conquest of Canaan, and this takes place over several years as well. And I'm sure Caleb was one of his trusted generals and his trusted soldiers, and we know that he led several of these battles and participated in those. Then he became a settler. Once the pathway was cleared and the land of Canaan was open and free to them, he became a settler. He started to settle the country. Doesn't have as much detail there, but the vision is he sets up family and he starts the process of building a home. He becomes a shepherd, if you will, a leader in his family, a leader in the tribe of Judah, and at the end of the day, I wrote he's a receiver. Through his patience, through being capable and dependable and trustworthy, you find that in the end he got his reward. He was steadfast, he was diligent to what God wanted him to do, and in the end he received God's promise. So let's go to chapter 13 of Numbers, and we'll start reading and just go through the scripture here and get a good look at the actual events. Then we'll go back and talk a little bit about the application of what we learned about Caleb. Numbers chapter 13, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel. Now at this point, all 12 are listed. I'm just going to read 2 of them. From the tribe of Judah, you have Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and you have Hosea, the son of Nun, from the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 16 goes on to say, These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hosea, the son of Nun, Joshua. So Moses picks his 12. Each one's a representative of one of the tribes. I specifically mentioned Caleb and Hosea here, who becomes Joshua. And the interesting thing here, you may start to see the advancement of Joshua, if you will, spiritual level at this time. He was singled out by Moses and had a name change, and that's kind of significant because we've seen that historically in the past throughout biblical accounts. It's almost a rite of passage Abram to Abraham, the different things. Moses singled him out and gave him a new name, gave him Joshua. Commentary in my Bible says, Hosea meant salvation, Joshua meant the Lord saves, and then it talked about the similarity between the words or the names Joshua and Jesus. Jesus is meaning very similar things. So early on, we see Joshua almost elevated a little bit at this point. But Moses has assembled this group. He's got the 12, and he's going to set them up to go into the land and spy them out. Verse 17, then Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up this way into the south and go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests there or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So Moses gave them a task. Go into Canaan, spy it out, size up our enemies, see what their cities are like, see what their strongholds are like, check out the land, see if it's plentiful. Come back prepared to let us know exactly what we're about to face over there. Verse 21 says, so they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. And they went up through the south and came to Hebron. Ahiman, Shishai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were there. Now, at this point in time, in this particular story, Hebron's important. It's important in where Caleb eventually lands. Just remember that. Put that in the back of your mind. The descendants of Enoch, evidently these people were pretty well known, probably pretty scary. The children of Israel knew who they were. Now, I don't know how savvy you can be from captivity or how much you can learn in a year when you've been focused on what's going on at Mount Sinai, but they knew who these people were. So it makes you think that, this is a very strong and powerful group of people. Verse 23, then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between two of them on a pole. The valley of Eshcol actually means the valley of the cluster. They actually named it because of what they find there. So you're seeing a picture of things being very plentiful, very bountiful. We've got grapes around here. Who's ever held a big cluster of grapes? I mean, you can probably find some that'll just barely fit in your hand, right? This one they had to string up between two men on a pole and towed it out of there. So it gives you an idea of how fertile and how ripe things were in the quality of the area that they were in at this particular time. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down there. And they returned from spying out of the land after 40 days. So these 12 go out, they check out the land of Canaan. 40 days later, they return to Moses. Verse 26, now they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word of them into all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. Their cities are fortified and very large, and moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. So at this point, the men as a group put up maybe something that's a little scary, maybe something that's a little negative. What we find is they certainly were afraid to go in there. I wrote down uproar, negativity, scared. I think that was the instant reaction from the people that they were telling this to. And And I envision, with a few million people, they didn't have technology. This is a group of leaders that they're communicating with, giving their report, letting everybody know. They've probably been sitting on pins and needles. They're going to the promised land. I mean, this is a big deal. Let's figure out what's going on. And these men come in and kind of shock them, We got some adversaries there. They're everywhere. The land's great. Don't get me wrong. The land's great, but we got some issues here. Verse 30 says, Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. The interesting thing here is it wasn't Joshua that stood up, although we know where he elevates in his spiritual leadership role. But it was Caleb that stood up and said, hey, it's time to go. God's promised us this. This is our time. We can make it. We can overcome it. Let's go. Verse 31 says, But the men who had gone up with him said, We're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants. In parentheses, it says the descendants of Anak came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. So we learn a little bit more about why they knew who Anak was and why they feared him. It's where the giants were. So a lot of these people, it's not like we're just going to go in there and fight people who are well established and they got strong cities and big walls and all that. We got these giants to contend with. And they belittled themselves just like they said they probably saw them as being belittled. They said, we're like grasshoppers to those guys. The case was made. You got 12, it's 10 against 2. 10 basically said God can't, and 2, Joshua and Caleb, said God can. Think about that and start thinking about the character and the characteristics of the nature of those two men and why those two men are listed when you start talking about patriarchs, how important it is to us. This was a very pivotal time in everything we know from our theology. God's leading these people. He's had trouble with them. They've been in captivity. They're not up to the standards. He's trying to get them back up to speed. Everything we've read up to this point is about getting to the promised land, There's side tracks. There's all kind of obstacles to overcome. And they're at the footsteps. And they've gone in to check it out. And 10 out of the 12 men come in and says, there's no way we can do this. Only 2 said we can. Only 2 said God can. Chapter 14, So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. Now everybody knows. Okay? Those leaders went out, and they told their captains and their generals, or however that hierarchy played out, and they went out and overnight communicated what these spies had said to the children of Israel, to this 2 or 3 million people. The message was negative. We can't do this. We're not ready. It was not what they needed to hear. They wept that night. Verse 2 says, And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, Let us select a leader and return to Egypt. I wrote the same thing here that I had written about Caleb. What had they seen? How quickly do they forget? They were there when God delivered them out of Egypt. They saw his power. They saw his might. They saw him on the mountain. Now they get to the entrance of the promised land. This is what they've been hearing for hundreds of years, all their lives. This is coming. And they're the ones physically standing at the gates almost, if you will. and they can't get their heart right. They can't see what God's doing for them here. They'd rather go. When they said they'd rather go back to Egypt, I thought, how many of these people were in Egypt thinking, man, if Moses don't stop with all these plagues and all this stuff that's going on, these people will kick us out of Egypt. We're going to be out there starving. You know, I bet that's what some of them were saying. Their faith was struggling a little bit here. We got two that are steadfast, though. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all of the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. I've tried to figure out exactly what the implication of that is. I really don't know. Were they giving up, throwing the towel in? You know, I can imagine the tongue lashings they've had over the last year or so. It's been a tough thing for them. It looks to me like they were cowarding a little bit. And that, you know, talking about Moses and Aaron, that's kind of hard to understand too. But think about them as men in the position they were in. It would have been a tough place to be. Verse 6, but Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us. It's a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. So again, you've got the two strong men of the 12. You've got two, I'll use the word righteous in a sense, leaders, believing men, faithful, understanding what God's asking them to do. Tore their clothes. You always think when people tear their clothes, if nothing else, they're serious. You know, there's a serious level behind tearing your clothes. And that's what they're doing. And they're doing this in front of all the children of Israel. They're letting them know, please don't think this way. We've got a task at hand. God is with us. We can do this. But they don't listen. Just isn't going to happen. Verse 10 says, and all the congregation said to stone them with stones. So they're over here talking and trying to get everybody on the right path, and they're turning on them as well. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. God shows up. I don't think he was happy. I wrote down angry, and I probably shouldn't say that, but he wasn't happy. Verse 11, then the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people reject me? How long will they not believe me with all the signs which I have performed among them? I will strike them with a pestilence and disinherit them. I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. And Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear it. Now, this is an interesting thing. It's almost like Moses is bargaining with God a little bit. He's using human logic to try to convince God to back up and give these people a little grace. He says, all the Egyptians will hear it, for by your might you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land, that they have heard that you, Lord, are among these people, and that you, Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands above them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, if you kill these people as one man, then the nations which have heard of your fame will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people to the land which he swore to give them, therefore he killed them in the wilderness. And now I pray, let the power of my Lord be great, just as you have spoken, saying the Lord is long-suffering and abundant in mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he by no means clears the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers of the children to the third and fourth generation. Pardon the iniquity of the people, I pray, according to the greatness of your mercy, just as you have forgiven the people of Egypt even till now. So Moses pleased with God. He said, give them a break. You know, Again, it's kind of like bargaining, but he said, you know, if everybody hears this and they know you're with these people and you couldn't get them to the promised land that you said was coming to them, what are they going to think? You know. Verse 20 says, Then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test, now these 10 times, and I have not heeded my voice, they certainly, this is an underlined place in your Bible, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valley tomorrow, turn and move out into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. So he says, okay, I'll do that. I'm not going to kill everybody. There is going to be an action. And nobody here basically says, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers. Only Caleb. Of course, we know Joshua was part of that as well. Verse 26 is the verdict. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, As I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in the wilderness. All of you who are numbered according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and your son shall be shepherd in the wilderness 40 years, and bear the brunt of your infidelity until your carcasses are consumed in the wildernesses. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. I, the Lord, have spoken this. I will surely do so to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In the wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die. So what God says is a punishment because you didn't trust me, because you didn't do as I asked, because you didn't have the faith, and like Caleb, you didn't follow me wholly. He even said he had a different spirit in him. For every day that the spies are out, you're going to roam in the wilderness for 40 years. And there's where the story turns. And there's where the children of Israel go back, not lost, but just wandering. It was a punishment. And we know, as he says here, if you were 20 years or younger, it didn't apply. But the rest of them, we know, all fell and died in the wilderness. And they didn't get to go into the land of Canaan, save for Joshua and Caleb. So we've got the children, a little summary here. We've got the children of Israel wandering for 40 years. And what we know happens after that 40-year period, Moses dies. Joshua's elevated to the position of leadership there. The Lord comes back. He talks to Joshua and basically says, it's time. You know, prepare the children of Israel for battle. We're going to go into Canaan and take this land over. You start hearing terms like the conquest of Joshua. They cross the Jordan. First battles, they take Jericho. Best I can tell, reading through some things, these battles take place for about 5 years. And they come to the land of Hebron. Remember how I said earlier, I was talking about the land of Hebron, and that'll play out into Caleb's place in the tribe of Judah, as far as where they're going to be, and the land that they're going to be given in Canaan. So now let's run over to Joshua chapter 14. We'll be looking at verses 6 through 14 to start. And we'll skip over to 15 and pick up a few more verses to make the point. Then the children of Judah came to Joshua in Gilgal. So you've got Caleb's tribe, the children of Judah, basically at this point, after 5 years, like I said, of fighting and taking over land, they come to Joshua, and they're basically coming to discuss their place, their portion. And Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know the word which the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea." He's reflecting back 45 years ago to where they had went in and God had told them what was going to take place. He says, "I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. But I wholly followed the Lord my God. So Moses swore on that day, saying, Surely the land where your foot is trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, here, I am this day 85 years old." So Caleb's telling you exactly how old he was. He was 40 when he went in to spy. They roamed for 40 years. That made him 80, and they've been fighting for 5. So he's 85. "And yet I am as strong this day as on the day that Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength for war, both for going out and for coming in. Now therefore," and again he's talking to Joshua. We'll call him a trusted old friend, a trusted leader. "Give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke in that day. For you heard in that day how the Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out as the Lord said." So he's telling Joshua, I want my promise. That's the piece of land I want. And I'm willing to go take it today at 85, just like I was willing to go take it when I was 40. I'm strong. They may be fortified. I'm ready to go. He's not only been patient, he's been planning, I think. Verse 13 says, "And Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb as his inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb the Kenizzite to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel." Verse 13 of chapter 15 says, "Now to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a share among the children of Judah according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, namely Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron. Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak from there, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak." So just like he wanted to do 40 years ago, 45 years ago, at the age of 85, he asked for it. Joshua granted it. He went in. He took over Hebron. And that's where he established the tribe of Judah and his family. That's the story, but think about the application for a minute. Caleb was chosen. He was chosen by Moses. He was chosen by the Lord. He was chosen by the tribe of Judah to be their leader. He spent 40 years roaming the wilderness, 5 years in battle. It's all part of God's plan. Think about the characteristic of him. Think about how it could apply to us as Christians today, how we live our lives as followers. He had character. There's many times he could have laid down, joined the crowd, but he stood up. He knew what God asked him to do. He knew what was right. He fought for that. He had courage. I don't know about you guys. I ain't ran any giants lately. or had to fight any armies that were well fortified in big cities. But he had this courage, and he had commitment. I think he planned every day for 40 years. He knew the time would come. He was told that everybody save him and Joshua would not be able to enter. He knew before he died he would have to stand up and fight. His opportunity would come. My question, are we all in like Caleb? Are we all in like Caleb? I think he was in. I think he was in when he was a slave in Egypt. He was ready to go. There was an interesting point I read. I don't, the names that we read mean nothing to us. I don't know of anybody that would understand some of those things. You have to study pretty deep or read what somebody else has studied. But him being of the descendants he was not an original Jew. His family at some point probably married in or became proselytes. So to me, that's even a little more special that he's in the lineage of Jesus Christ through the tribe of Judah. And he came in just by hearing and following and obeying, and that's how his family got in. Are we committed to follow God and stand for the truth? Are we committed to follow God and stand for the truth in His time? It doesn't always come like we think it would, does it? It's not always on our timetable. It's on God's timetable. And that's what Caleb had to find out. Caleb knew that when God gave a task, He would also supply everything needed to do the task. No doubt. He never questioned. He said, we're ready. Let's go now. But how many times do we sit back and think, well, this stuff stacks up, then I'll go. I've got 2 or 3 things I got to get taken care of, then I'll go. Well, just as soon as I can do this, I'll go do that. That's not the way it works. When we're told it's time, we're supposed to react just like Caleb did. Last question, do you have the patience of Caleb when it comes to staying on track? His plans, his desires were set back 40 years, yet he didn't falter. I think that's a good lesson for all of us today. We have to be patient, steadfast. I think Caleb's a pretty good example of a patriarch. Certainly worth studying. Not a lot written about him, but it's a pretty neat account of some things that took place. I hope all of y'all got something out of that tonight. I know I did. Appreciate you coming. And if you would, we'll end in a quick prayer. Father, thank you for today, the blessings it brings, the opportunity we have to be here tonight to study from thy word, to look at the life of Caleb, to look at the life of Joshua, how they lived as examples. Father, we're thankful for men like this before us, set the path, give us the examples of what it's like to follow you. Father, we're thankful for men like that are in our lives today. We know that we all have people to look up to, people that understand the path that we're supposed to be on. I ask for patience and steadfastness that we can all follow those things and obtain the promise, just like Caleb and Joshua did, the promise that you've laid out in front of all of us. We know is there for us and well within our reach. That we've got all the tools we need. And we're thankful that you love us. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen.